So the first challenge of the Decision 8 is to work out what the correct spelling of decision is, because I never really worked it out. I used to be an English teacher until somebody discovered that I couldn't spell. Then I lost my job as an English teacher. So, the Decision 8 is a data collection and analysis method which gives us a consulting framework for the purpose of good decision making, which basically means this process gives you the way of running a consulting project within an organization and gives you a number of the different stages that you need to follow in order to make sure that it works. Okay. Now, as with all consulting practices, we are focused in and around two specific areas. One of them is, or the place where we're going rather, is here. This is the future vision of how we want things to be at the end. And the place where we begin is over here, a good, clear description of the status quo and where we find ourselves at the current stage. So, let's have a look at the beginning stage. The beginning of the Decision 8 is here. The first stage is what we call the problem definition, defining what the problem is. And in order to help us do this, we look for questions and symptoms of the problem. So in going into the meetings right at the front end, we say, okay, what's going on? What is the problem? And people will say, well, I don't really know what the problem is. Okay, what are some of the symptoms of the problem? What does that mean? What is happening because of the problem? It's amazing that sometimes the problem definition is actually the most critical stage within the whole process. And coming out of the consulting process with a clear definition of the problem is sometimes very, very valuable for the different people concerned. But I forgot something. I forgot a fundamental piece of information that we need to consider, and that is this word here. This word says contracting. Contracting is the process of creating a verbal or a written contract with somebody to move into the consulting area and into the consulting space itself. Yeah? So what does contracting actually mean? Let me show you an example of contracting. Philip, seeing as you're my victim all the time in this process, and because you're always on the camera now anyway, Philip, as your IT demand manager, my job is now to effectively contract with you to enter into a consulting stage. We've spoken about the website portal for medical 4 or 5 times now, and as we agreed last time, this has basically opened a Pandora's box. Yeah? My job is now to ask you and to contract with you that this Pandora's box is something that we wish to address, and I'm asking therefore for permission to enter into the consulting cycle with you and your team to set up a series of meetings, to be given authority and empowerment to start engaging with this process. Is that okay?
More than welcome.
More than welcome, and the contract is signed. Or you don't even need to sign it. It is signed because you said more than welcome. Okay? This is the contract process. Another interesting thing. Who went for dinner? Who went for dinner in the last 4 days? Did anybody go for dinner? Yeah, yeah. You went for dinner? They went for dinner. You went for dinner. You had a nice dog. Dog curry. Yeah. Now, at some stage, at some stage during the process of having dinner, yeah, when you were implementing your dinner plan, did somebody come up to you? Did a waiter come up to you at any stage in your dinner implementation process? And did they say, "Is everything okay with your food?" Yeah? 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 Okay. Now, I used to go to a catering school, a hotel school. And during that hotel school, we had a lawyer come into the room. And the lawyer said, "So, boys and girls, let me tell you, why is it important to ask the customer whether the food is okay or not?" And we said, "Well, sir, because it's polite. It's very polite to ask the guests whether the food is nice." "No, that's the wrong answer." Somebody else said, "Well, because I don't know. It's polite. We're waiters. That's what you do. You go and see if everything is okay." "No, that's not the correct answer." Somebody says, "So that if they don't like the food, you can ask them if there's something else that they want to eat." "Well, it's closer, but no, it's not the correct answer." He had a funny lip. And so what is the correct answer? And he said, "When you go up to the customer and say, 'Is everything okay with your food?' this is a legally binding contract. This means they have to pay. If you do not ask them if everything is okay with your food, they can get up at the end of the meal and walk away without paying, and you cannot stop them." Amazing, huh? So the next time that somebody says to you in a restaurant, "Is everything okay with your food?" be careful. Say, "Not really," or, "Well, can I answer that question later?" Yeah? And so, as waiters, we were advised to go through the contracting process with our customers. Is the food okay? Yes. Good. That means you're going to eat it. Yeah? That means we're going to get paid for it. As an IT demand manager, we need to go through a contracting process with our customer. I've just asked Philip for a lot of resource, right? I've just said, "Can I contact your people? Will you stand behind me when I start asking difficult questions? Will you get my back when it gets difficult? Will you support me in this process? Will you give me the time investment that it needs to go through this? Will you endorse my emails as I send them out? Will you light the fire under somebody else's backside when it comes to the time to get work done?" I'm not sure Philip actually realized that he was contracting for this level of investment and input. If you do not contract, you will fail in your consulting endeavors. If you do not contract, this consulting exercise will not work, because at any stage in the process, whenever people want to step back at it and say, "Nah, it's a waste of time," they can do so. But if the contract is clear, it's clearly defined, they will not be able to do so. And another thing is this, yeah? When you as an IT demand manager enter into a consulting process, if this consulting process fails, you will be blamed. Nobody else, you. You will be the scapegoat. You will be the idiot who started the ball rolling. You will be the person who made promises that couldn't be achieved. You will be the person who made everything so complex it was impossible to move things forward. Yeah? You. Sounds good, huh? Yeah. There we go. And now it's not me. Now it's Philip. No, it's not. It's both of us. We're jointly responsible for this. But it is very worth saying, without the contracting process, nothing happens. And you should do nothing. Because without support, without a key decision maker, without somebody leading this process, then it's extremely difficult to move things forward. So within your case, where there was no apparent owner of a process, I'm sure, I hope, you can tell me afterwards, I hope there was a meeting where you said, "Okay guys, in summary to this meeting, I just want to make one thing absolutely clear. I am now going to take the role of the consultant for this process, and you guys are going to say yes when I write you mails, and you're going to respond in a timely fashion, and you're going to do the things that I need you to do in order to move through this process." That's contracting. We'll come on to the discussion of how that worked in a minute. So, defining the problem. Any questions to the problem definition stage? where do we move from here? Okay, problem definition. Yeah, could be one meeting, 10 minutes. Very unlikely. Yeah, could be 5 meetings, 10 minutes each. More likely. For complex environments, could also be 2 weeks, 15 meetings, 18 emails, a lot of reflection, and 3 or 4 potential problem scenarios. Yeah? Whatever happens, usually the result is the data collection stage, where we go into the process of collecting all of the data that we need. Yeah? The data collection stage is, this is the harder work. Sometimes the definition of the problem is impossible because the data has not been collected, which means the result of this meeting is a series of meetings for the purpose of situation analysis, understanding the current situation and status quo. Yeah? And this should definitely come at the beginning. It should definitely come at the beginning. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that is this. After data collection comes an extremely important stage, which is called the hypothesis. The hypothesizing stage. Interpretations and depth of why this data looks the way that it is. Why this problem is the way that it is. Why this situation is the way that it is. The hypothesize stage. Do you know what a hypothesis is? A hypothesis is a statement where you say, it could be this. This could be the reason. And the word could is a very important word within this construction of consulting. We don't say it is, we say it could. And the process of consulting is not to create the hypothesis yourself, but to ask the questions that elicit the different possibilities of hypotheses from your internal customers. Okay, at the end of this process, there will be a series of diagnoses. There will be a number of hypotheses. There will be a number of ideas of why the situation is the way that it is, and there will be a diagnosis. It's possible that there'll be different results from that diagnosis, but the diagnosis will be to conclude, we have now defined the problem. We have checked the problem through a whole series of data. This data and this problem have now been interpreted, and we've gone into depth in the way that we have made several case scenarios about why we are at the place where we are, why we have these problems. Okay? What are the reasons and backgrounds for having the situation and going through the situation that we are going through? This hypothesis stage has been an extremely interactive stage, as are all of the stages, but the real skill, if you like, the first clearly perceived skill of the consultant will probably be most visible in the hypothesis stage. In the problem definition stage as well, you'll also have a very, very visible part of the consulting skill where you are potentially standing in front of the group saying, okay, I hear 3 problem definitions. And you've got them on flip charts or on post-its, and you've got them on walls. You say that this is the problem, you say that this is the problem, you say that this is the problem. What's the problem? Please, let's define the problem. Let's create a definition of the problem that everybody can accept, the problem that needs to be solved. So the facilitative skill, or the moderator's skill, of getting this problem definition onto the table is another key area where the skill of the consultant really comes out. The visible and interactive and communication skill of the consultant. Problem definition. So we've just seen an example where it's very unlikely, for a real case example, if you say, what's the problem? How many times are you going to get exactly the same response? Because even small differentiations in understanding and perception of the problem will take you in fundamentally different directions when it comes to consulting the problem. If one person says what we are doing is against the law, and another person says we're not fitting in with our legal requirements, these are two fundamentally different problem statements. Moving ahead with one and moving ahead with another could take you in different directions. Naturally, they're both correct, but what exactly is the problem? Because these two different statements are different. One of them is correct, the other one is less correct than the other. Which problem exactly are we trying to define and to try to resolve? Data collection. How do we collect data? Through meetings, through interviews, through files, through database, through surveys, research. Yeah. And then the second question, how do we collect data? If I'm a process-oriented type of person, I'm going to collect this type of data because I'm like this. But if I'm a relationship type of person, I'm going to collect this type of data because I fold my arms the other way around. So how do we collect the data means what tools and processes do we use to collect it, but also who does the collection? Are you the type of person who can ask both types of questions, or do you need another person to come in to help you with this process? Okay, and now to the hypothesis stage. Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to ask a series of questions. You have got about 10 seconds to think of a question. This needs to go quite quickly. Our problem definition, let us agree that the problem definition is we're breaking the law. Okay? That's the problem definition. We will now all think of a hypothesis question. Yeah? Your job is just to listen. Okay? So you just need to listen. You do not need to answer these questions. This is an example of the process of consulting in the hypothesis stage. We ask hypothesis questions to the owner of the problem. They're not expected to answer. Somebody will collect. They will be used in the diagnosis later. But here we go. So I'll give everybody 10 seconds, a hypothesis question. Why is the problem a problem? And I would like you to begin your problem with the following words. Could it be that? Okay? And I will begin. Could it be that somebody in the organization is physically and consciously trying to break the law? Who has got another question? Yes?
Could it be that we are interpreting that wrong?
Could it be that we are interpreting that wrong? That our interpretation is incorrect? Another question. Could it be that we have the incorrect data for this information? Another interpretation question, hypothesis question.
Could it be that we made the wrong analysis?
Could it be that we did a wrong analysis? Yeah? Could it be that the agency that we are working with has given us data that is old or out of date? Could it be that the people who have worked on this project have simply extrapolated the information from the other project that they were working on and assumed that this is the same type of case? Could it be that our legal people have not seen this topic yet? Could it be that globally there is initiative to solve this problem which we haven't addressed?
Could it be that the possible solution is uncompliant?
So could it be that the possible solution is uncompliant?
Could it be that we were talking with the incorrect people?
Could it be that we were talking with the incorrect people? Could it be that the owner of the problem should not be the owner of the problem? Could it be that they don't have the skills, knowledge and experience to deal with this specific case? Could it be that this is not simply a local problem but could blow up on a regional level and a national level? Okay? So what we have here is an example of the process of the hypothesis stage. The hypothesis stage is a process of hypothesizing, of making hypotheses, of saying, could it be that? Yeah? That's the job and the role of the consultant, to ask these questions and to create the environment where these questions get asked. Okay? The diagnosis stage that follows it is the diagnosis. Again, we need somebody qualified to do the diagnosis. Who normally does the diagnosis? The doctor. So the doctor knows what he's talking about. As an IT consultant, you're possibly the wrong person to do the diagnosis of this topic. Yeah? Which means you're able to help them define the problem. You're able to help them go through the process of collecting the data. You're very much able to help them through the process of hypothesizing. You're probably not able to help them through the process of creating the diagnosis. However, 5 people in the room, very possible that there are going to be 5 different perceptions of the diagnosis as well, which means you're definitely able to bring those different opinions together and for the 5 people to come up with this clear, yes, this is the diagnosis of our problem. I've kind of got a feeling that some of you are saying, bah, do we have to spend so much time on the problem? Isn't it a little bit negative? Yes, it is. Because you have to go in depth in order to really understand the problem and the pain if you want to get to the stage where people are going to see the value in solving it. Yeah? But from now on out, it looks relatively clear. And from this stage, I'm sure you've already seen that what we've got here is a series of potential meetings and a series of potential engagements with a group of people. And it is a way of structuring the consulting process relative to time and resource need. You can run these conversations individually, you can run them in groups, but you need to run them whatever they are. So, our Decision 8 begins. We begin here, we go around here, and now we're coming down here to stage number 5, establishing the goals. What do we want to achieve? Future vision. What is our perception of where we are trying to go with this? Description, success criteria, to a certain extent even, key performance indicators and exact specifics of what this goal would look like. Yeah? Next stage. Consider alternatives. Creativity is called for. Out-of-the-box thinking is called for in the alternative stage. Remember our discussion yesterday about using the power of the external vendors in order to come up with alternatives for us? Maybe this is something you've prepared for already in this stage to get them thinking about this topic and coming up with alternatives that we can put onto the table at this stage. Again, this is possibly IT alternatives, but this is very probably business alternatives to solve the problem as well. So just because we come from IT, it still means we need to keep our IT specs away from us to make sure that we're considering all of the possible alternatives that are there. Creativity is a key. And if you got the feeling that this is not moving in an IT direction, then you're going to potentially need other out-of-the-box thinking capability to come in and propose alternatives to you that the business can accommodate well in their thinking. Yeah? Evaluate. How do you evaluate the alternatives that you've come up with? Well, these would be based on the step 5 criteria where you have established goals. So these alternatives, there will hopefully be a good level of alternative thinking to come up with different proposals, and this will be used as the criteria for evaluating the different alternatives that are there. Yeah? And finally, identifying people, responsibilities, accountabilities, and making decisions at the end. So, as we said, institutionalizing the approach and putting it into the organization so that people can get busy and start working on it. Yeah? So within the contracting stage that we have already discussed as being so important, this contracting stage is going to be very, very clear from one particular perspective. Dear customer, I've got some good news and some bad news. Which would you like to hear first? The good news is future vision. We will get to the stage where we can speak about goals, alternatives, evaluation criteria for those alternatives, and then set up responsibilities. The bad news is that in order to get there, we need to do the hard stuff first. And the hard stuff means we need to go through some pain. And the pain is related to defining exactly what the problem is, to going through all of the data collection stages and getting every piece of data onto the table that we need. We're going to need to create a lot of hypotheses so that we can come up with the correct diagnosis of the problem that we need to solve. Yeah? So this comes into contracting, because contracting above all is a matter of setting expectations and of being clear as to why we're going to do the things that we're going to do. Within this framework, there are a couple more things that we need to say. And one of them is the fact that at some stages we will need to be nice, and the other thing is at some stages we will need to be nasty. The principles of talking nice and talking tough are fundamental to the consulting skill. And this is also something that within a facilitated meeting is something that it's quite clear needs to be there as a message. Gentlemen, at some stages you will find me nice to speak to. At some stages you will find me not nice to speak to. That's because my role as a consultant is to ask easy questions for easy answers, tough questions for tough answers. So please don't hate me too much when I put on my nasty hat, or get too surprised if I change to my nice hat within one meeting. That's the role of what I'm here to do. Okay? That was a message. That was it's probably a good place to take these messages when they come. Okay. The Desicion 8 model. Look at it from the context of 8 specific meetings. You have 5 people. It's completely unrealistic to suggest that you could run this whole Desicion 8 model in 8 meetings. But from the perspective of timetabling, it's actually a sensible thing to do. Yeah? Sending out an email that says, ladies and gentlemen, this process will take 8 meetings, minimum, but hopefully will be good enough and efficient enough to get it done within that time. It will also take a series of face-to-face conversations and of email exchange, and a lot of data will need to get collected in the meantime. These are the suggestions for the meetings that I would like to set. Could we please put these into our timetable? This is also a format of contracting from the very beginning. Yeah? And this means you have your place and time, your placeholders within the calendar, which give you the space and time that you will need to do a good, thorough job of the consulting process. Yeah, is it possible? Sure, it's possible for a clear problem which everybody in the room wants to solve, with positive thinking and future potential behind it. Definitely, we can take a complex topic and deal with it within a series of consulted meetings and facilitated meetings. The reality is it's going to take 12, 14 meetings with 2 people, with 5 people, with 1 person, with 3 people. The reality is that one of those people will change and disappear halfway through the process. We'll need to bring somebody else in on board. The real reality is that 2 of those people will be the problem. Okay? And that's a problem for the person who needs to address the problem, the fact that the person is the problem. That's going to be another element of it. The other reality is that the great alternatives that are created are illogical, immaterial, too expensive, not strategic, don't fit within the strategy, etc., etc., etc. So all of the potential problem areas of the consulting cycle will arise out of here. but now you have a system for dealing with it. Yeah? So what we have done is we have looked at the principles of behavioral and process-oriented consulting. We've reflected on the need to keep both of these areas firmly in the mind's eye when going through this process. We've looked at the principle of contracting, and we've looked at two different consulting models that can be used from a more behavioral focus or a more process-oriented focus, and the realization that both processes keep both of those areas in mind as well. And we now have a framework for moving forward into consulting topics as and when they come up.